Hello, my name is Kiriath, and today we are going to talk a bit about the idea that we might need a new Space Marines Codex, and this is down essentially as a response to Chapter Master Varak's video about the new Eliminator weapons they get in the Las Fusils, and the fact that at this point Space Marine Codex doesn't actually have some of the stuff you need to field the units that Games Workshop have brought out for Space Marines. And in a way, this is like a weird response because I both agree and disagree with the idea that we need a new Codex. On the surface of it, yes, we do. I mean, there are units out that we do not have the rules for in that codex, and so therefore we need one that actually has the proper rules in. I mean, Primanius Calgar isn't even in there, and he was a massive part of Vigilus. You know, a whole reinvention of that character, the update of that character was a fairly big deal. You can't field him using the codex because he doesn't exist in there. He's still in his Terminator arm, and he's still a normal Marine, or at least as normal as Manius Calgar ever was. And on that front, yeah, a new codex is a good idea. But on the other hand, I disagree in that at this point, I don't think we need new codexes for anything other than essentially collector's items. Because the codexes no longer do their job. The Space Marines are an excellent example of this, whereby there are like multiple units that do not have entries in the Space Marine Codex. The way that Games Workshop releases new models, they release new kits, they release just new data sheets, is completely and fundamentally incompatible with the idea of having an actual physical copy of the rules. And it has been for quite some time. I mean, the way they've approached 8th is, frankly, better than the way they've approached previous editions, but it very quickly has meant that the pledge of not having to take 8 million, supplemental books to whichever tournament you're going to doesn't really properly apply anymore. Between the FAQs, between chapter approved, between, units being released after the codex has come out and therefore their stuff can't be in there. Things like the Noise Marine being a good example. That's the data sheet for the Noise Marine, which comes with it in the box because it's not in the codex. The codexes are increasingly showing that they are essentially a relic of a time gone by, where they're still a big part of releases. They're undoubtedly still a big part of releases, and they're still popular. It's not like they should go away completely, and because I know for a good number of you will be sitting there going, but I like the physical thing. I don't want the digital thing. I like the physical thing. I'm there with you. I like the physical thing. There is a reason I've kept, most of the codexes that I've bought over the years. I mean, the ones that don't have are ones that have just been lost when moving house. I haven't even chucked any away specifically. And I have, for instance, most of the D&D 5th edition stuff digitally. I also have a good amount of it physically because I like the physical copies of it. I'm someone who still prefers reading an actual book over using like a Kindle or whatever. But when it comes to something like 40k, or indeed any tabletop game that sees frequent updates, there comes a point where you have to acknowledge that the changing rules, the additions to the system, to the factions, mean that physical is no longer a sensible way to do it. The codexes are outdated. They're not just outdated in terms of the information they provide, and they are outdated in terms of the information they provide. They are essentially fundamentally outdated as a concept. You can't continually update your game. You cannot tweak unit profiles. You cannot tweak rules. You cannot introduce changes to physical copies. Unless you just print new versions of physical copies every time you update them. And of course, every time you print a new version of the physical copy, someone's going to have to go out and buy said physical copy to replace their old physical copy because the old physical copy doesn't have the stuff that they need in it. After a while, people are going to be like, why the fuck did I pay for the first version of this codex when if I'd waited 6 months I could have got the second version, which would have been up to date? And then you would release another Space Marine unit, because that's what happens, and then that codex would be out of date again. You can't do that. No one is going to be happy with that solution. No one is going to like that solution. The idea of selling perhaps inserts that you could buy from Games Workshop and, place in the back of the codex. That's a possible solution, but it's still fixing an issue that really is completely unavoidable in that the physical copy is not going to be up to date. Ever. I mean, the day it comes out, yeah, but give it like 2 weeks and what? Something will probably have changed. There's also the fact that people are not going to want to pay extra for supplemental content for the Codex when, if they again waited a little while and a new Codex came out, they could just pay for the Codex and it would have all the updated stuff. Or, alternatively, you could do what they did with the Space Wolves Codex, where they made some mild errors in terms of printing it perhaps before they were finished with it, where it was suggested that you could go and download and then print off the pages required for the Codex. That didn't go down well either, because it comes down to the fact that you have bought a finished product that is then turned out to be unfinished. I'm genuinely baffled at this point as to why they haven't essentially set up a subscription service. And I know that just the mention of that is going to cause a flood of don't give them ideas, what the fuck is wrong with you. And to a degree, I kind of agree. But if things are going to be updated continually, if things are going to be kept level with the changes to rules, the changes to units, the additions to armies, you either have to push digital as the primary format, or set up a way for people to receive all of the rules for a monthly cost, like D&D Beyond sort of. I think D&D Beyond is a monthly thing, don't they? I'm sure there's an example out there somewhere, but there needs to be a switch whereby people are pushed more towards using the digital side of stuff. It's not as fun, personally, to look at a phone instead of look at the Codex. I accept that, but it is a little bit easier. It's not as satisfying to flick through your iPad or to go to the table of contents and go to the right page as it is to turn the actual page of the Codex. I completely acknowledge that and I agree with that. But if your Codex has not got like 4 of the data sheets you need to play the game, it makes far more sense to actually have something that updates continually and is kept up to date when new things are released than to have a Codex that doesn't have the things that you need within it. I think the idea of actual physical codexes are just way too outdated at this point. I've said it before and I keep saying it because I'm trying to essentially persuade that they are nice. They are undoubtedly nice. They're nice things to have. They're nice things to own. They're nice things to read. But they don't match what Games Workshop does anymore. They don't match the way that they tackle changes in 8th. They don't match things like the FAQ and chapter approved and all of that. They don't match those because once they're there, they are there and they stay there for months and months and months, like years, and then eventually they get changed and you get the nice updated version and then you wait a little bit and it's out of date again. In a way, it's the same with the core rulebook. There have been changes to a lot of that stuff, and to a similar extent, the rulebook is not as helpful as it once was because some of the stuff in there is flat out wrong at this stage. With the core rulebook, it's slightly different. I think there is the argument that, at least with that, you can get started. There are things that have been changed, but it's not as though stuff is not available to you, so to speak. You can get by with it. But the codexes lack vital information about certain units. They're just not in there. And given that the whole point of the Codex is that it tells you how to play your force and what your options are, that is a distinct failure of the Codex. And you wouldn't have that issue if the digital side of things was pushed, whereby you could still buy the Codex, you could still get a physical copy, you could have your collector's edition that you know will be out of date and you don't care. Because along with it, you have the digital edition. And the digital edition gets updated when a new unit is released. The digital edition incorporates the changes from FAQs and from chapter approved and all of that shit. It's actually kept level with the things they are doing to the game. Because the codexes aren't. The codexes just fall to the wayside and become the foundation upon which you build a binder full of printed pages, or, one of 4 books that you take to the tournament, or it's the same issue that we've had before, but this time we are in essentially an era whereby most people have got access to an internet connection most of the time. Most people have got a device that could easily do the job of the Codex most of the time. And a lot of it does come down to a satisfaction point of view and like what you prefer to use. But preferring to use the physical version kind of becomes irrelevant when your physical version of the thing doesn't have what it is supposed to have. When it doesn't have the information you need. It's all very well preferring to use the physical copy of something, but if that physical copy is missing the entries for 3 of your units, your physical copy's kind of shit at that point. Let's be totally honest. I mean, I'm surprised that we haven't seen some sort of subscription service whereby you pay a certain amount a month and you get access to a certain number of codexes. Those codexes are kept completely up to date. Same with the rulebook. I'm surprised we haven't seen that. And I would be surprised if we didn't see that at some point. But there needs to be a push to try and make it so that when things like the Eliminators have a weapon that just doesn't exist in the Codex, it's not a faff to get hold of it. It's not a pain in the arse to deal with. It's not a case of, well, my book's out of date now, what do I do? Something needs to be done to switch it up, because it's not a satisfying way to play if you're scrambling through a book, a binder, looking through your phone, checking the other book that you brought. It's just not great, you know? Anyway, that became a little bit rambly towards the end there. Shocking, I know, for this channel, who'd have thought. Let me know what you think in the comments down below about the idea of potentially just scrapping codexes entirely apart from making them collector's items, having some sort of service whereby you have the codex on a digital device at all times, it's kept completely up to date, start to finish. I realise this is probably going to be a bit contentious, but I'd be interested to hear what you think. And for those of you who are in the camp of I just want physical, look, I get you. I own multiple versions of codexes, I own multiple versions of the D&D 5th edition stuff. I prefer physical as well. But if it's not up to date, it's not up to purpose, is what it boils down to. So that's just where I'm coming at it in terms of that particular attitude. So yeah, let me know what you think in the comments down below of all of that. In the meantime, feel free to click all the things if you would like to, Patreon, video subscribe, all that shit. There's also an affiliate link in the description for Element Games, whereby you can buy your 40k stuff if you would like, and Star Wars, X, all the other shit as well. You sell literally everything, including paints and brushes. Look, just literally everything you need for tabletop stuff. That is an indirect way of giving something to the channel, because I get a little something for it. You don't spend any extra, you just save money on what Games Workshop would charge normally. So that is an option that you can take if you would like to. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time. Toodaloo.